Thank you. Oops. All right. So this morning, David and I will be presenting, and we're going to be talking about Theodore Parker. Did I miss the chalice lighting? No. All right. It's the next one. All right. Okay. All right. Our theme this morning is finding our roots, and the highlighted values would be transformation. How was Unitarianism transformed? And pluralism, how incorporating many different thoughts. So who would like to light the chalice? Callan and Lily are out pondering the color selection in the new teen space. So do we have a volunteer to light the chalice? All right, Aiden. And as Aiden lights the chalice, I'll read this. Each Sunday we light the chalice of our religious heritage. We do this for our ancestors who taught us through their various religious traditions and by their actions for justice and hope. We do this for our children who are learning the traditions we teach and who learn more from our actions than our words. We do this for ourselves so that we are inspired to remember our beginnings, reflect on who we are now, and spread our wings as we understand who we seek to become. So now we'll just take a moment for everyone to greet each other. I'm sure you've done a little bit of that already. Callan, you missed the lighting. It's okay. right, now that everybody knows each other, it's our tradition at every service to share our joys and concerns. So anyone who has a joy or a concern to share can come up and say what they'd like to say into the microphone and drop a rock in the water. Who'd like to go first?
Well, I have several joys. One, my sister's daughter and her son and her daughter's boyfriend visited this week, and we had a chance to engage with them. It was wonderful. And then my other sister, whose husband passed away a month and a half ago, at first said she wasn't going to come to my birthday party this September, and she changed her mind, and she actually booked her airline tickets online. Hooray for her. It's the first time she was able to do that. So we will be able to see her this fall, and it's going to be wonderful.
Sure.
I was going to go to Muir Woods this fall and visit the beautiful area before it got all cut down. But I read in this magazine I get, news magazine, that they're just devastated because he cut so many people off the staffs of the national parks. And of course the next thing he's going to do is start cutting the trees and drilling. So bad. I don't know if we'll go or not.
That's a concern, the state of our forests. All right. Come on.
I'll share a joy that I'm visiting my mother and my two sisters here, and that she has managed to come back here, a place that she talks very fondly of. So I'm happy that she's come to visit you guys today, and hopefully she'll come back.
I celebrated a friend of mine's birthday party, I think a week ago. It was really fun, so I really enjoyed it.
Anyone else? Does anybody have like a birthday today or anything to celebrate? Oh, really? Tom was August 4th? Oh, I think maybe someone in the Leake family is today, which is very wonderful. And welcome back, Marion. Right? And I know you're hard of hearing, so if you can't hear us, we'll try to speak loudly. Can you hear me now? So we will try to speak loudly into the microphone and have the volume high so that you can hear for sure. Okay. All right. So I'm going to put a rock in. Here's one for all the birthday people, and one for all the joys and concerns that go unspoken this morning. With that, we're going to move into our topic for the day. I was hoping that Reverend Tollefson would be here because I'm quite sure that he is more deeply steeped in knowledge about Theodore Parker than I am, or David. But David is quite a historian and has done quite a bit of reading on Theodore Parker, so we're going to do our best. We're going to do our best today to talk about this amazing human being and the influence that he has had on the spiritual beliefs that we collectively hold today. You're all familiar with the Gettysburg Address. Come on up. David and I are going to be tag teaming this today. Should be fun. So he's going to chime in wherever he sees fit. So we're all familiar with the Gettysburg Address, and we are especially familiar with that last line, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from this earth. But who said those words first? Where did those words come from? Did you want to say something here or not yet? Okay. Well, yeah, just keep it in mind. Where did those words come from? Theodore Parker. And we're going to talk about him today. Okay, how did you know? How did you know? All right. Then we have our own Betty Friedan, the feminine mystique. When she wrote The Feminine Mystique, which maybe some in this room read in the 60s or the 70s, she wrote it in 63. She wrote, "Feminism was not a dirty joke. The feminist revolution had to be fought because women quite simply were stopped at a stage of evolution far short of their human capacity." Then I quote, "The domestic function of women does not exhaust her powers," the Reverend Theodore Parker preached in Boston in 1853. "To make one half of the human race consume its energies in the functions of housekeeper, wife, and mother is a monstrous waste of the most precious material God ever made." Theodore Parker. Interesting. Who knew? Then we have this quote. "We shall overcome," from Martin Luther King's speech at the District of Columbia in 1968. "We shall overcome because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." What actually made us think about this talk today was this next quote recently when the Obama Library opened, and we heard this quote again. "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." Those words have been credited to Martin Luther King, to Barack Obama, but who actually said them? Theodore Parker. Yep, and Barack Obama in 1925 added on to these comments, and they are inscribed somewhere in the new library. Has anybody been to the Obama Library yet? The Obama Center. Yeah, it actually has a lending library in it.
Architecture reflects an arc.
Yep. Yep.
Of the building.
It's part of the building, and it's inscribed somewhere. Yes. So in 2025, then Barack Obama added, it bends towards justice, except it doesn't bend on its own. It bends because we pull it in the direction of justice. What keeps me hopeful during times like these is being surrounded by people who are doing just that we each and every day in our actions pull the world toward justice. In 1952, Parker, in the 10 Sermons of Religion, wrote, "I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eye reaches but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by the experience of sight. I can divine it by conscience and form what I see, I am sure, bends towards justice." So it was Theodore Parker who said those words. So, who was this guy? Are any of you really familiar with Theodore Parker? Heard of him? I mean, maybe heard the name. We heard it when we took this quote, and we thought, let's do a deeper dive. So that's what we've been doing. So who is Theodore Parker? Well, he was born in Lexington, Massachusetts in 1810, the youngest of a very large family. Most of his family died by the time he was 27, and they died of tuberculosis. He actually died in Italy of tuberculosis in 1859. So he did not live a very, very long life. He was influenced, and we're going to talk a little bit more about his philosophies and just what went on here and how they really folded into Unitarian Universalism. But he was also very much influenced by his mother. And he used to tell the story from his childhood to illustrate what he considered the birth of his own religious awareness. Grew up on a farm outside Lexington in the early years of the 19th century, the last of 11 children, to a struggling farmer and his sweet-natured wife. Aren't all wives sweet-natured? He recounts that one day, at around the age of 4, his father took him to a distant field to help with some chores. After a time, though, he told Theodore to walk home. On the way back, Parker says, he was passing a pond when he saw a turtle basking in the sun. He was carrying a stick, and he lifted the stick to strike the turtle. But before he could act, he says, he felt something stay his hand, and a voice inside him say loud and clear, "It is wrong." Returning home, he asked his mother, "What was that voice?" He quotes her as saying, "Some people call it conscience. I like to call it the voice of God in the soul of people. If you listen and obey it, it will always guide your right. But if you turn a deaf ear or disobey it, it will leave you without a guide. Your life depends on heeding this little voice. And this was really the beginning about what we're going to talk about later of Theodore Parker's belief that the spiritual comes from within. It comes from within, not from a Sermon on the Mount, not from the voices of others, but from within. He was also a self-taught prodigy. He was a very intelligent. He could read 20 languages by the age of 25. He graduated from Harvard Divinity School in 1836, which I did not know this. The Harvard Divinity School in 1836 taught Unitarianism. That's what, if you went to be a minister at Harvard in 1836, that's what you learned. That's what you were taught, Unitarianism. Harvard does. And at that time, Unitarianism didn't look exactly like Unitarian Universalism looks today. It was more based in Christianity at that time. You probably should be giving this talk, Anna. Yeah, but chime in anytime if anybody has any thoughts. He was a leader and a member of the Transcendentalist Club, formed in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 1936. 1836. Did I write that wrong? Or 1936? 1836. Typo, sorry. Ralph Waldo Emerson was very, very influential in the Transcendentalist movement. In 1837, after he got out of school, he settled at a small Unitarian parish in West Roxbury, Massachusetts. It became a huge, 3,000 members at that time in Roxbury, Massachusetts. He was an extremely powerful orator and became very, very popular. And now my husband, David, is going to chime in here with some thoughts.
So whoever that was a couple weeks ago in their joy stone dropping that said how happy they were about the opening of the Barack Obama Center, I can't remember who it was, and I don't necessarily hold anything against them, but I do kind of regret me adding that the arc of truth bends towards justice was actually first coined by Theodore Parker. Because I guarantee you that at that moment, Alison did not know who Theodore Parker was. And here we are. Here I am. So, been drafted. Theodore Parker was an incredible, brilliant, determined Yankee. His first Parker ancestor that came to the United States, not to the United States, to the colonies, came in 1635, Thomas Parker. His paternal grandfather, John Parker, his father was John Jr., but his paternal grandfather, John Parker, was a staunch British loyalist, fought through the French and Indian Wars, was on the plains of Abraham with the British, with General Wolfe, when they defeated Montcalm in the Battle of Quebec and ended the French presence in Canada. His grandfather was there. His grandfather was the captain of the Lexington militia when they met the British redcoats on the road. And his grandfather was the captain who spoke the words, "If they wish a war, then let it begin here." And his grandfather's musket hung in his office, in Theodore's office, for the rest of his life. And Theodore was, as Alison said, just a brilliant, brilliant student and a huge reader. So I kind of identified with that. His library kind of makes mine look pitiful. But anyway, when he started school, his schoolmaster made the observation, showed the traits that were later to distinguish him. A memory almost photographic. So the schoolmaster had a hard time when Theodore was 6 teaching him his Latin vocabulary. And 40 years later, Theodore remembered that the schoolmaster was disappointed that he never could learn how to pronounce Avello, A-V-E-L-L-O. I don't know if I pronounced it right, but that stuck in his memory for 40 years. And he could recite volumes of poetry, before he was 15 years old. So an almost photographic memory, incredible curiosity, which even if you are gifted with wonderful intelligence, if you do not have that driving curiosity, you're not going to get much out of that. A passion for reading, a vanity which required him to outstrip his schoolmates, and which served him well in his, forthcoming conflicts with the organized church, and a mischievous sense of humor. I'm not saying that I necessarily identify with this guy, but he appeals to me a lot. So when he went to Harvard, he couldn't afford to go to Harvard. So he did what we call audit the whole curriculum. So he didn't have to pay, and he had to do all the work on his own, and he did 3 years of work in 1 year to finish Harvard Divinity School. In 1 year, in addition to the regular texts that were expected to be read, he checked out 320 books from the Harvard Divinity Library. And apparently read them all. It's interesting, too, that at Harvard, as one of my other historical heroes, Theodore Roosevelt, he had to be admonished that, see here, Mr. Parker, I'm running this class. Which many years later, Roosevelt heard from a Harvard professor. The languages, Persian, Coptic, Arabic, I can't even remember the whole list, but basically, even though he translated philosophic texts in German, he could hardly make himself understood in Germany. So his language knowledge was very academic and very thorough, but it didn't go to the extent of being truly conversational. But he had tremendous respect for German religious philosophers and secondarily French religious philosophers. He loved West Roxbury, and the Unitarian church that is still there in West Roxbury is the same church that he began his first pastorate at. And in 1962, it was renamed the Theodore Parker Unitarian Universalist Church, and that name remains to this day. But he loved living there. It was a real close-knit community. He had wonderful neighbors and enjoyed them. He kept the hedge between his house and the Shaw's house next door, and they'll come back into the story later. He kept it trimmed short enough that he could step across it because he wanted to be able to be engaged with his neighbors to that extent. So he kept up with that part of his landscaping. So he was an incredible intellect and a determined scholar, and later became a prolific author. And we're going to get to more of that as we go.
So what did Theodore Parker believe? He embraced transcendentalism, which developed in the early 19th century, the early 1800s. It was an organic consequence of the Unitarian emphasis on free conscience and the value of intellectual reason. As David mentioned, that curiosity, that let's see what do we really know. The Transcendentalists hold strong belief in the power of the individual.
Keep going.
Oh, I'm sorry. Destructive. All right. That's okay. Transcendentalists have a strong belief in this power of the individual and their primary concern with personal freedom. They embrace science and believe that institutions, organized religion, and political parties corrupt the purity of the individual. He was heavily engaged in religious controversy that existed at the time with Unitarianism and between the different Christian denominations. And we're still seeing that today. Ruptures in churches and split. We're seeing it in our town. 2 of our churches ruptured. So there's always this ever-changing belief systems. So he was one of the first, Theodore Parker was one of the first American clergymen to endorse women's suffrage. He was the first to refer to God as both father and mother. He was an intellectual leader in the anti-slavery movement. He opposed the pro-slavery Mexican War, and he took charge of the Boston movement to rescue fugitive slaves. One of his major concerns at the time, now remember, Unitarianism, he was Unitarian, it was still steeped in Christianity and in the Bible, but he was very, very concerned about how the Bible was read. He fought those who quoted biblical texts to justify slavery and oppose women's rights. And we're seeing that today in how people are reading the Bible literally and saying it says this, and oh, it says this, and it's opposed to these people. He opposed that in the early 1800s, any kind of reading like that. He challenged belief in the miraculous authority and factual accuracy of the Bible as a form of idolatry and an obstacle to the development of the soul. That the soul wasn't going to be developing if you weren't questioning, asking, and not believing. He said you would love the Bible better, he believed, if you did not worship it. Interesting. The big moment came in 1841 when Theodore Parker wrote A Discourse on the Transient and the Permanent in Christianity. And some of this goes pretty deep. If you start Googling this and you start reading, you can spend a few days digging deep into this on what were they talking about? The transient and the permanent? But this was how he went after it. He brought into question the origin and the authority of the Bible, the nature and the authority of Jesus Christ, whether or not the belief that the revelation of God's will through Jesus Christ was absolutely required for salvation. He likened it to, and he said, it was hard to see why the great truths of Christianity rest on the personal authority of Jesus any more than the axioms of geometry rest on the personal authority of Euclid or Archimedes. That it's not about the person who's delivering the message. It's about the belief and the science or the whatever behind it, not the person whose mouth it's coming from. So he didn't necessarily believe in the absolute, that belief in that Jesus Christ was the deity. Jesus Christ was the voice of the belief. Interesting. Pop in with any questions if you have. Not that I can answer them all, but if you're curious. Anna? With Thoreau. We actually talked about that this morning. It's boring at our house. Henry David Thoreau, and how did he fit into all this? Do you have any thought on that, David?
That's coming up.
That's coming up. Okay. Stay tuned. All right. So a little bit more on this permanent and transient. And this is just in a nutshell. When Theodore Parker talks about the permanent, he talks about the absolute, unchanging spiritual reality and direct relation between the human soul and God. And God being, as we'll learn later with Universalism, very broadly defined in the concept of love. So the absolute, unchanging spiritual reality and the direct relation between the human soul and God. It's things like, a representative of that would be the truths in Jesus' teachings, the truth behind the words. What was the truth? The infinite God, the voice of God in your heart, discovered intuitively that we all have God, that it's the internal, it's the intuitive that we're born with, that's in us. Moral and spiritual truth, and love for God and man. The transient, on the other hand, are the external, human-made, changing structures of religion that vary across time, culture, and institution. He called it the non-essential, the noise. And it's things like the Bible, scriptural authority, dogmas and creeds, religious rituals and forms, buildings, churches, institutional labels, that this was all just the noise. This is the transient. And by the transient, he means it can change and evolve as needed, but the permanent never changes. The permanent is always there. It's kind of like your core values. The permanent is always there. Might exhibit themselves in different ways. The religion might exhibit itself in different rituals and things, but the permanent should remain the same. Now I'm going to cut away to my fabulous partner. Right?
I'm just doing what I'm told. So one of my favorite authors, Doris Kearns Goodwin, wrote a book just a few years ago during the 2016 administration that we endured. And the title of the book is Leadership for Tumultuous Times. And Theodore Parker truly lived in tumultuous times. The Dred Scott decision was in 1857. Dred Scott was an escaped slave who'd been enslaved in Missouri, and he and his wife and children escaped. He lived for 4 years in Illinois and in what was then the Wisconsin Territory, where slavery was forbidden. And so he sued for his freedom. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court decided that he could not be a citizen because of his status, and that therefore the case would not be heard, and it was dismissed. And of course, that was something that really began the heartbeat and the strength of the American abolitionist movement. The other one that really enraged people in Massachusetts was the Fugitive Slave Act. So there was a Fugitive Slave Act in 1793, and that was tightened up, and the consequences for aiding fugitive slaves were elevated tremendously in 1850. It could include imprisonment for people that were aiding fugitive slaves, and the people in Massachusetts really embraced engaging fugitive slaves and helping them get to places where they could be free. So that was part of what activated Theodore Parker's social consciousness and his activities as a social reformer. He and his wife went to Europe in 1843, and the one thing there are many things, he respected German academics so much, and one of the things that struck me in this one biography I was reading was, and it struck me especially considering the circumstances that this country of ours is in today. In Munich, there was a sample of European despotism. The city in a state of siege, chains across the street. Parker's reaction to that was that could never happen in America. And that was in 1843. So with the events that were happening around him, with the Dred Scott decision and the Fugitive Slave Act being strengthened, he became more and more engaged in abolitionist causes. And when he returned to this country, he began to gather huge audiences. He had plenty of theologian adversaries because of this heresy, that he was supporting. But his supporters that were part of his congregation, some of them regularly, is telling and pretty significant. One of the early, I don't want to say converts because he was the father of transcendentalism, was Ralph Waldo Emerson, was a regular supporter of Parker. Emerson was an essayist, a poet, a philosopher, and was the leader of the transcendental movement in the United States. One of his close, I would say, subordinates in transcendentalism was Henry David Thoreau, who was a naturalist, a poet, an author, and a big follower of Emerson. And interestingly enough, Thoreau was a greater fan and supporter of Parker than Emerson was. more enthusiastic about Parker. Parker was more enthusiastic about Emerson than he was about Thoreau. So these three giants had this kind of clockwise and counterclockwise relationship, and all three of them accomplished very significant things. Another regular in his congregation was William Lloyd Garrison, American publisher, leader in the abolition movement, social reformer, abolitionist, and the publisher of The Liberator, the most read, most widely distributed abolitionist newspaper in the country. Another one of his regular congregants was Charles Sumner. Charles Sumner was a Massachusetts senator from 1857 to 1874. And he was a Massachusetts senator who was beaten on the floor of the Senate by a South Carolina senator so viciously with his cane that he almost died. That was in 1856. Sumner came up for re-election in 1857, had not regained his health even to the extent that he could return to the Senate. His desk sat there empty. And Massachusetts voters re-elected that empty desk to the United States Senate, because that's how strongly they felt about abolition. At one point, an anti-secessionist South Carolina senator had said, South Carolina is too small to be a nation and too big to be an insane asylum. So feelings ran strong. Anyway, Sumner was not healthy enough to return to the Senate until 1859, 3 years after the attack. And then he was reelected over and over again and served in the Senate until 1874. And he was a regular participant in Parker's services in West Roxbury. Elizabeth Cady Stanton. She was a writer. She was the most significant leader of the women's movement in the 19th century. And she was the driving force behind the Seneca Falls Convention of 1848, which was held in Seneca Falls, New York, and was the first national convention for women's rights and women's suffrage. She was a regular. Julia Ward Howe. Julia Ward Howe was an author and a poet, and she wrote the Battle Hymn of the Republic. This is quite a cast of characters. Determined, idealistic people. Another supporter of Parker's was John Brown, who tried to create a slave rebellion and raided a federal armory in Harper's Ferry, Virginia, in a short failed revolution where the United States Marines that came to interdict were led by a young captain named Robert E. Lee. So it's kind of a small world and highly motivated people. William Herndon was a law partner of Abraham Lincoln's. And on July 4th, 1858, he heard Theodore Parker give a speech that included a recurring line of Parker's, the government of all the people, which Lincoln, I don't think, included in Gettysburg. All the people, all the time. By the time that initial book was published, it sold incredibly across Europe. And he was getting fan letters from England from any number of people, just regular lay people and noted people. One was Francis Newman, who was a philosopher and an author. And Theodore Parker got a fugitive slave couple all the way from Massachusetts to Francis Newman's home in England, where they stayed. England had banned the international slave trade in 1832 without slaughtering 700,000 of their countrymen. Edward de Soor was a Swiss geologist who did a lot of surveying of mineral resources in the United States for the United States government. And Parker was just so intellectually curious that he struck up a lifetime friendship with Desor. Two of the old neighbors from West Roxbury. When they moved in, there was a little boy next door. His name was Robert Gould Shaw. Robert Gould Shaw, in 1861, became a captain in charge of the 54th Massachusetts Colored Infantry Regiment, who he fought for tooth and nail for the rest of his career, including encouraging his black troops to refuse pay until their pay was the same as the white troops in the Union Army. In his last engagement, Parker led the 54th Massachusetts against Fort Wagner on a sand spit in South Carolina and died. He was 25, and he had been Theodore Parker's next-door neighbor in West Roxbury. Those events at Fort Wagner were depicted very wonderfully in an 1989 movie starring Denzel Washington and Matthew Broderick called Glory. The younger sister, Elizabeth Shaw, Josephine, married a guy named Charles Lowell, who ended up being a very young general in the Union Army. He fought in the Peninsula Campaign. He fought at Antietam, the bloodiest day in American history, where 22,300 men died in one day of battle. He was killed in action at the Battle of Cedar Creek at the age of 29 in 1864. He'd been married to Josephine for less than a year. Then I think one of the most significant ones that was a regular supporter and correspondent with Parker was Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass was a social reformer, an orator, an author, an essayist, a statesman, an escaped slave. And he built a life that anyone would envy. He was the most important leader of the movement for African American civil rights of the 19th century. He thought so much of Parker that when he finally visited Europe, the first place he went was Florence, where Parker died in 1859. I couldn't find the year of Frederick Douglass's visit, but the first place he went was Florence, and when he got off the train, the first place he went was Theodore Parker's grave. Quite a cast of characters.
It kind of makes you wonder what the coffee and refreshments at their church sounded like after their services. I'm sure a lot like ours, right? The distinguished people. So, how did Theodore Parker, how did all of this impact UU, the UU we know today? Well, we do not depend solely upon a single body of religious literature, the Bible, whose authenticity, accuracy, and credibility are questionable. We don't depend solely upon the pronouncements of a central church hierarchical authority. That's where this thought originated. Instead, what we believe, that we believe that all moral and religious revelations have not occurred only in the distant past, but that additional insights have occurred since that time and are still occurring even up to this present day. Instead, we believe that moral and religious revelations come not just from one source, but from multiple sources. Unitarian Universalism is more like a science than a religion, in that we believe we are getting closer to the truth by asking questions and seeking answers from multiple sources rather than being certain that we already know that which is true and that no further inquiry is necessary. So what does the evolution of this look like? We've been through lots of dates. Did I put the wrong century in all of these? I think I did. No, did I? Universalist. Well, no, this is right, 1900 here. All right, so both organizations evolved. You had Unitarianism and Universalism evolving in the 1800s, evolving. And in 1933, the first Humanist Manifesto was heavily influenced by Unitarian ministers. This Humanist Manifesto came out, really focusing on humans and the internal beliefs. In 1953, that's not that long ago, right? The Universalist Declaration of Faith came out. The Universalists were still separate from Unitarian, two different religions. The Universalists said they believed God as an eternal and all-conquering love. An eternal and all-conquering love. That is where the concept of the love in the middle, comes from. They believed in the supreme worth of every human personality. Sound familiar? So 6 years later, in 1959, the Unitarians came out with a statement of purposes and objectives. They mentioned the teachings of Jesus as love of God and love to man, which came directly from Theodore Parker's 1841, more than 100-year-old writings. A lot of this came from the writings of Theodore Parker. He put out many, many sermons. In 1961, Unitarianism, Universalism combined. 1961. A lot of us were little kids back then. Two organizations merged. They summarized and unified their faith in the document of the principles and purposes. And in 1985, again, not very long ago, they clarified those 7 principles that we know today, the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalist Association, which are: we, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant and affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, something that came from humanism, from universalism. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Acceptance of one another and encouragement of spiritual growth in congregations. A free and responsible search for truth and meaning. A right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. The goal of world community in peace, liberty, and justice for all, and respect for the interdependent existence of which we are a part. All of these 7 principles, I think, when you think about them, really fall into that realm of the permanent, not the transient. All right. David?
So I hope that this gives you an idea of what this guy was all about, because I think it's important for us to understand where we've come from. And when you think about that cast of characters that I mentioned that were supporters of Parker, with all of the wonderful qualities they shared, the thing that strikes me the most is courage. The abolitionists, the women's suffragettes, social reformers of every age and every location. And it's not always easy making progress. So I think that courage is an important part of making progress. And the choice of espousing Unitarianism when Theodore Parker was finishing divinity school and moving on had not always been, an easy one. And the Universalist was a new idea. That was transcendentalism, that was Ralph Waldo Emerson. And it's interesting to note that all of those acts of advancing faith took courage. 2 Unitarians in England in 1611, simply because of their rejection of the idea of the Holy Trinity, were the last people in England burned at the stake for choosing that faith. So courage, I think, has always been a part of change. And it's important to look at people historically who have made important change happen because of their courage.
And of course, our work in pursuing our own religious beliefs, but also we have work to do in defending the religious beliefs of others. I wake up really early in the morning, and I went on Facebook early this morning, and I was downright flabbergasted to see that a high school classmate of mine had reposted something on Facebook that was basically a statement saying, we need to wake up and smell the coffee here, folks, because here's what Muslims are doing in our country. They're running for office. And here's how many more Muslims are represented in office. And now, we have others in our government who are referring not to people as Muslims, but as jihadists. So what is our work in countering this? I thought, take a pause, don't respond to this yet. But it's being spread out there, things like that, and how do we then behave to not only pursue our own spiritual beliefs, but defend the rights of others to pursue theirs. Any other thoughts or conversation that anybody want to throw any ideas, share any ideas on this? Anna?
I began to be a Unitarian Universalist in 1961.
1961, Anna.
It was actually after that, shortly
Oh, right when they were coming together.
in college.
Anna joined right at the start of Unitarian Universalism. That's great.
Church by Mayo. They named that something.
Okay. By Mayo down in Rochester? Oh, by mail.
Not in a place.
Okay.
So I helped form the Winona.
Oh. It was a church formed by mail. People corresponded by mail.
But then I was going to Winona State, so I helped form that.
Oh, so she helped form the Unitarian Universalist Society at Winona State. Good for you.
No, well, Winona,
In Winona.
because we had a lot of professors.
No internet then. You couldn't do an online Zoom meeting. No. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. All right. We'll move on to announcements.
I could pitch in. Just
Oh, do it.
comment, okay?
Absolutely.
Then we'll use the microphone. We're still getting used to this.
Yes.
Just for those who are new to this organization, yeah, I was surprised at the 1985 Seven Principles slide that you had. As Anna said, the two organizations combined in 1961, but it took them a long time to come to those seven principles. And recently, in the past 3 years, 2 or 3 years, we've revised those principles a little bit. That caused some consternation, Article 2. A lot of arguments. Some people, organizations, since we're not that centralized, have kept the seven principles, but we have the new ones that we focused on last year.
Right.
So this society here in River Falls started in 1989, 1990. So just 4 or 5 years after those seven principles were adopted.
Yeah.
I think it,
They have those red things that
right.
they were taken down.
The closing words.
We're enjoying the blank walls right now, Anna, but we'll see. Okay, we have to talk to our interior decorators and also use the democratic process here as far as
Yes.
redecorating.
For the moment, we're proud that no one died painting these walls. The scaffolding was close to heaven. Right.
So that thank you for the history, and
Yeah.
I do know that thanks to Theodore Parker and all the people that you mentioned, that Unitarianism really grew strong in the late 19th century, and for some reason it dissipated in the early 20th century, and this is my personal belief. That's why the organizations got together, because they were both hurting for membership. So let's hope that we can rise to that. Maybe, David, you saw something in your reading about that.
Thomas Jefferson, of course, a famous supporter of separation of church and state, or whatever the language is, shall establish no religion, predicted that within 3 generations, everyone in America would be Unitarian.
As he was.
As he was.
Yes. Everyone would see the light by that time. So we have a little work to do to shine our light, right? And away we go. And Don, thank you for mentioning that. I should have included then the transition to the new principles as well. So next week, there is no service. It's community time on August 23rd. And on the 30th, Anne's going to talk a little bit, I think, about we're going to have a potluck dinner. September 6th will be the welcoming, the water service. And on September 13th, which is the second Sunday of the month, we are going to advertise and welcome families to come and talk about religious education. This will be our first round at that. We're going to have a pancake breakfast at 9:30, and then we're going to welcome, advertise, and talk about spiritual education or religious education. So hopefully we're able to attract some people to that. All right. And then Anne wants to use the democratic process to talk about some options.
Yeah, I need a little feedback. But before I go to this, the garden has 10,000 cherry tomatoes. If you need any, probably some cucumbers. Mint and basil are out there to pick if you help yourself. There is a yellow jacket nest in the 3rd concrete raised bed, so be careful there. Okay, because there are 5 Sundays in August, we have to come up with something for that 5th Sunday. I had an idea that we could have maybe an evening service, a potluck dinner, and I have contacted a bluegrass band who's willing to come and play for us. That involves some money to pay them. So I don't want to plan something on a Sunday evening, which is out of our normal range of activities if no one's going to come, like 6 people. So I just want some feedback here. So here's some possibilities: that we have a potluck dinner, we invite this band, and it would be for you people, and we maybe make an attempt to invite people in our membership or congregation that we haven't seen in a while. Okay, that's a possibility. Or we could just have an ice cream social or a dessert something for you USRF people, friends. Or we could push this out to the wider community and invite anybody to come and listen to the music and maybe entice them with ice cream or desserts or something, okay? Or we could have a Sunday afternoon, which is more usual time, potluck or lunch or something. Or we could just have another Sunday of no service because people say it's summer and we're busy and we don't want to be here. So can I have a show of hands and you can vote more than once if you want to, which of these options seems most attractive to you? Again, it's the financial consideration that I'm most concerned about. I don't want to pay money for a band if no one's going to come on a Sunday evening to listen to them. But if you're not going to be here, please don't vote to have the band, okay? If you think I can't attend. Yeah, Don.
Would option D involve music also?
No. That would just be, sort of a regular Sunday get-together with some food, but no service or anything, okay? So, potluck dinner with music for UUSRF members and friends. A, raise your hand, okay. B, kind of the same thing, but not a potluck, just desserts or ice cream with a band, with music in the evening.
So food over ice cream.
Yeah, so easier, okay. The third one, invite the community for ice cream with music in the back, okay. And maybe outside, if we can figure this out. Okay. Sunday afternoon potluck, that's better, okay. So the evening, it looks like the evening time is not so attractive. Or no service. Okay. Okay.
Potluck at lunchtime?
Potluck at lunchtime looks like it's...
Yeah. We can play music. We don't have to have a band.
That's true.
We can do our own music.
That's true. Okay, thank you for your feedback.
All right, that sounds good. Okay, all right, your support, UUSRF, your presence is always good, but we also appreciate financial support as you are able. And then we've got some really good treats. Several people brought treats today. We've got great coffee and treats. And now we will rise and gather for our closing words. Just raise an arm, wave your arm.
Yeah, that's good.
All right.